So my first cliche speaker question, who here thinks they've interacted with open data already in their lives? So pretty much everyone, that's pretty impressive. Can I just get a sense of the audience? Who is employed by the Crown or a government agency? Who's employed by the private sector? Is there another segment? I think 2 segments are good.
Community volunteers.
NGOs and volunteers. So volunteers and NGOs, we've put community groups together. So we've got quite a good cross-section of people in the group, which is very cool. So I'm from OptimalBI, and we help companies foster innovation through doing cool shit with their data and helping make their information visible. And I didn't check whether I was allowed to swear, so I apologise. And we love open data, and we do quite a bit with open data. And so today I'm going to talk to you all about becoming open data heroes. And I'm sure I can use the clicker. So to help us become open data heroes, we need to understand the answer to 3 simple questions. What is open data? It's quite simply the first question that I'll answer. Many of you here probably already have a definition in your mind, so bear with me. We may have different definitions, and I'm happy to discuss at the end of all of the presentations any opposing views. Next is what stops opening up data. So there are people and personas who have preconceived ideas about the challenges of opening data, and I'll take you through some of the tools and techniques you can use to help them understand the benefits of open data and encourage them to become open data heroes like all of us are in this room. And finally, I'll discuss how to prioritise which data to open, and more importantly, helping you keep personal information and personal data that should never be open, secure and out of any discussion. So to get us on the same page, first of all let's talk about what we mean when we say data. And I'll just have another disclaimer here. The lovely Sean over here with the tech support wrote this wonderful slide or basis of material for us in our team. And so when I say we, I mean we as an OptimalBI as a royal we. So there's lots of complicated technical things I could talk about. There's lots of jargon that we could throw into the mix here. But in reality, data measures things that are of interest and things that are interesting to people. So think about the data that you work with every day, because we all work with data in some form every day, and what your organisation measures, whether that's people or groups, organisations, processes. There'll be some meaning in this kind of definition for all of you, I'm sure. So why measure at all? Why even generate all kinds of data about people and organisations and spaces? Well, once you measure something, you can compare it with other things, even track its performance over time, and then we can make more informed decisions. And I think everyone in this room can agree that it's better to make an informed decision than take a stab in the dark. So if data can unlock better decisions, open data can help further unlock decision making and help transform decisions for cultural, social and economic benefits. And that's a pretty solid business case as far as I can tell. So what is open data? And that's the real question that we're here to discuss today. This is the introduction into a series that will help you all expand your knowledge on open data over a few weeks of great talks. The simplest definition that I've been able to find, and there are some really complex definitions, so don't get me wrong, you'll Google it and you'll find, I don't know, something like 30 different definitions. Some of them have lots of words in them, but the simplest one that we can coalesce around is open data is data that can be freely used, reused and distributed by everyone. It also has some quite specific characteristics. One of them is open data is easy to find. Open data is easy to understand. Open data is safe to use. And getting back to the point that I made before, it can't identify individuals, for instance. And if we need to reuse that data, we can do it without breaking any rules. Open data is also maintained. So a one-off spreadsheet thrown up on a website, buried somewhere in some page, never updated or loved again in its life, can't really be called open data. You can say it's shared, but it's not really open data because no one's maintaining it. So you'll notice the word government doesn't appear anywhere in here, and there is a preconceived idea that open data is all about government. But if you have data that measures something of interest, can be freely used, reused and distributed as I've described, then it's open data, whether it's created by the public or the private sector. Obviously the government, and aspects of the government, measure lots of interesting things, but it isn't the sole focus of the open data movement. Everyone measuring something interesting conceivably could open that data up for reuse. Soon you're going to hear from other speakers here and amazing people in this series that have achieved some awesome results from open data. And you've seen a teaser of that in that video, and there's a whole lot of other great videos on the internet with opportunities for creating economic and cultural impact through use of open data, so do go out and look for them. Open data can help increase transparency, release social and commercial value, and can increase citizen participation and engagement. And that seems to be an area that's a focus of a lot of research at the moment. So if you're here today and you already know everything I've said, then you're probably already an open data hero. So what's really stopping us all from embracing open data? Politics and perceptions aside, the biggest factor limiting the open data movement is people. And we as a team have encountered 7 different personas, we've classified them as 7 different personas who challenge open data as we've gone through our open data journey. So today I'd like to arm you all with some answers to help those people who may challenge your advocacy for open data to understand the benefits and become open data heroes like ourselves. So first of all, we have the denier. But it could also be someone who has no idea where to begin. They're just overwhelmed by the size of the opportunity or the problem. Often people will describe open data as a problem. This series of talks and the team who arranged them, who are all wonderful people sitting here at the front and standing here, are evidence that resources do exist within our community and within the public sector. As an open data hero, you can help the denier by connecting them with wonderful resources like data.gov.nz, or introducing them to this amazing team of people and let them actually have a real conversation. The next person we've found really wants to be an open data hero. They get a bit excited and possibly then they get a little bit smug because they've published a spreadsheet and, as I described before, buried it somewhere in a website, so they've shared it. But they haven't made it accessible and reusable and easy for the humans who need to interact with it to understand, or the machines that need to consume it to be able to consume that data. And remember, that data needs to be maintained and not left unloved. Next, we have the big spender who thinks you can solve every problem by buying some new kit or gear or software or tools. As we all know, technology alone can't solve any problem. To share open data, we don't need to reinvent the wheel, and we don't need to commission new big hardware, software, tool projects. We do need to invest in decision making, and we do need to invest in governance processes. So as an open data hero, you can help educate that big spender person who just wants to buy something expensive to solve the problem and make it go away, that actually you can achieve a lot with the resources you already have. Now next is the possessive type. He's a little bit like Gollum, who thinks data is precious and it should be locked up. So my disclaimer on that is locking your data away leads to excessive use of the Official Information Act. And for anyone here who has to engage with that process, we know how painful it is. So we can help Gollum by sharing examples of open data success and how it's transforming lives and creating values. The reality is many people haven't watched the video like the one that we watched at the beginning, which is a really basic introduction to how you can transform lives through open data. So show them some of those resources and point them at data.gov.nz. Now, I own a number of businesses and have been accused of being a capitalist on more than one occasion, so this is a subject I'm quite familiar with. The fact is that I'm not, and neither are most New Zealand business owners. I stress the most here. However, there are a few people who lack imagination and look for opportunities to turn any data they can lay their hands on into an opportunity to convert it into cash. If the data is sensitive, isn't sensitive, so if the data should be opened, open it. Create value in other ways by unlocking innovation opportunity. Public and state-centred entities shouldn't really be in the business of commercialising data that could be opened. And just ask yourself the question, what solutions to the housing crisis could we be discovering right now if more of our property data was open, for instance? So at the other end of the spectrum, we have the communists. There was a disclaimer at the beginning that some views in this presentation could be controversial, so be prepared. Some people believe it's an article of faith that nobody should make any money out of data. The reality is that people are and are already doing it. Some public sector agencies are even paying private companies to extract data from other agencies' data sets, transform it in some way, or make it more meaningful and useful for them to use. So it's already happening. We as open data heroes have a common interest in growing the economy and improving social outcomes. A recent G20 economic growth report, and if you Google open data G20 economic growth, you will find it, estimated the potential value of open data to the Australian economy as $64 billion per annum, and that's just a phenomenal transformative figure. Imagine if this level of economic potential could be unlocked in New Zealand. It would just completely change our economy for New Zealand. So I'm saving the best till last. Finally, we have the fearmongerer. So this guy or girl is the most dangerous of all of our 7 personas. They will often threaten you with the front page of the Dominion Post threat, so be prepared for that one. The fearmongerer uses very well-founded privacy concerns to strike down any discussions about open data in their workplace. Remember our definition from earlier. Open data is safe. We want the aggregates. We don't want to know if that guy's dog is called Rover. We want to know how many dogs called Rover there are in New Zealand. So I hope you don't encounter any of these people. Has anyone encountered any of these personas in their lives already? A few of you have, so you understand. So hopefully you're now armed with a few techniques and some language you can use when you do encounter this kind of objection. And we can all be open data heroes. So to my last question of the 3 was, which data to open? We often hear opponents of open data claim that those who are asking for data to be open are making unreasonable demands, and some demands are unreasonable, so I will give them that. To be clear, some data should never be open for valid privacy and security and safety reasons. Other data currently locked away behind walls that should be open and could be transformative, we really need to consider. There is a grey, or yellow in this case, area in between. So your data is probably already classified. You probably have a really descriptive classification program in place to classify all of your data. So why don't you add an open data classification dimension to that and re-tag all of your data as to whether it's open data ready, or use the traffic light system whether it's red, yellow or green. Once you've done that, the best place to start, of course, is with the green. That's the easy stuff. It's obviously should be open and everyone can agree on that. So all of this leads to the thorny question of how, and luckily there's a whole series of presentations to help you understand some really good examples and how to get started. But if you're looking for resources right now, here are 3 sites that I recommend you go to. Data.gov.nz is the place where existing government open data sets are listed. You can list your new government open data set for your government employees who come up with some, or if there's data you can't find, you can request data via data.gov.nz. Figure.nz turns open data into charts that anyone can understand. Go and have a look at some of the cool stuff they've done. And the data.nz is a new initiative which Sean, who I've referred to a few times here, feel free to talk to him about it later, has just launched, where he wants to make open data readily available for researchers with minimal fuss. Now our team like to write about open data, and we'll be doing more so moving forward. So just Google OptimalBI open data and you can find the resources we've already got and keep an eye on what we're writing. And that's me. Thank you very much.
I have a question about aggregation of data, which is that it's a great way of protecting privacy, but it can also really hide the value of some data. For example, MB through the Department of Labour's employment data has got age groups for different status, and you'd think 15 to 19 is a fair enough grouping, but in actual fact 15, 16, 17, 18 and 19-year-olds all work under different legislation, have got different sort of, entry rates and all the rest of it. But when I was trying to get disaggregated data, I was told, it's too difficult to do it. Now, I don't think it is, but, I'm just sort of saying, what arguments are useful to actually sort of use in saying what should be aggregated and what disaggregated?
I guess the level of granularity will depend on the way that that organisation has classified their data and whether they think that a more granular level would expose the potential risk of individuals being identified or patterns being identified to help you identify individuals. That's usually the main concern about, and youth data is a sensitive data area that people are concerned about. Does anyone else from my team have any thoughts on this?
Maybe they can't, but at some point they had data that they aggregated into 15 to 19. So at some point in their process, they did have data with age on it. So it is possible, but
it may be a sensitivity reason why they've done that.
I think the argument was used was cost.
Oh, okay.
And in this day and age, I don't think cost is a good enough, reason.
No, not really, other than, as Sean just said, it may be expensive for them to now go and unpick what they've done and give you the more granular data sets in a better form that you can consume.
So a similar question also came up with the census questionnaire about all the data's flowing in, but how easy is it going to be to get it out?
And I think stats are working hard on that to make that really easy for us to consume. I think it's a very important category for them at the moment. There's one that
I've just got a question about, are you talking about applying open data to data sets that already exist? But do you have any thoughts around how to get people to think about at data creation, about it becoming open data?
Yeah, so having a really good set of information management principles that incorporate open data. So some companies, their information management principles stop at the data belongs as a company asset, or it must be stored on company equipment, and you must be using certain kind of tools and techniques. But some information management principles will talk about disposal and retention and things like that, but they often don't go as far as, because open data is a relatively new movement, thinking about whether data, when it's created, should be identified and tagged as open data ready or open data capable at the time. So I would, if you're trying to get that thought process into people's mind, find whoever's responsible for your IM policies and go and talk to them and start a campaign to get open data added as a point of reference that's considered whenever any content is created. Those are my thoughts. I'll hand over to Mike.
My name's Mike Riversdale, and I work for multiple organisations. Can anyone hear me? I'm going to be doing that a lot and talking to those people a lot. My role today is to take you through an event called Gov Hack that happened in July as an example of the use of open data. Now, before I start, anybody, can I show of hands of who went to what was it called? Gov Hack. Cool bananas. Those that went, keep your hands up. Who knows what Gov Hack was or will be next year? About half of you. So there's half of you thinking, I have no idea what that man's talking about. Except I'm talking to you, you're my people. I'm representing an organisation called Miramar. We are based in a peninsula that you can probably think of. I actually looked up what we said we do at the moment, and it changes every day. But we are an advocation organisation for education and the growth and use of technology. We've set up some kids coding classes out in the peninsula. We also do connection events where we bring people together, geeks and non-geeks, and slam them together and see the fun that comes out of that. And we did the Gov Hack. So what was Gov Hack? Gov Hack was an event that ran in this building, July the 3rd to the 5th. It was a hackathon. Anybody, right, hands up again. Who knows what a hackathon is? Keep your hands up. Who's been to a hackathon? Of any sort, any description? Half of you have no idea. Excellent. So the hackathon is a way of bringing, say, the geekery side of the world and the open data side of the world together with people who have needs and desires to be met. We slam them together, we feed and water them, and at the end of it there is a competition, and they have created something. So over 2 days they've created an app or a website or something that then can be judged, and people can say, I've created this thing, and you've got the best thing. And we had Gov Hack events all over New Zealand, and the Gov Hack idea has actually come from Australia, and they've been running for a couple of years now. And so all of those went forward to a large competition that was both Australia and New Zealand. I'll go through what actually happened on the weekend in a minute. Biggest thing, Hack. Now Hack, Miramar and Gov Hack suffered from a wee bit of an image issue. It's the word hack. So those who have no idea about hackathons probably went, what? They hacked the government. We, in the community that set up the event, we had a visit from the spooks, who actually said, could you just tell us what this is all about? This was in a meeting in this building, which is fascinating. We thought, yeah, we're bringing the government down in a meeting room in MB. Hidden in full sight, that's what we thought. It's not a hack in the media sense. It's probably the best way. It's a clever solution to a tricky problem. So it's that number 8 wire hack. It's the taking something to pieces and hacking it together hack. It's not the crack sort. For an event, any event, including this one actually, but for the event that we ran and that we run, we say there are 5 things that you need. Date and time, 3rd and 5th of July. Venue, this wonderful venue. We had the whole of the bottom floor here. People, we had around 130 people that turned up on the Friday evening. A lot of them were like the half of you who had no idea why they were there, but they did know that we were going to feed and water them. And people, resources, so we had open data, I'll talk about that. And the final one is, why are they there? A reason. What's the point of this? And when we started looking at this, saying it's about open government and open data. That's a reason to spend your weekend in MB, isn't it? We thought, no, I won't go to that event. So we changed it, and it's the biggest one we did. We actually had a reason. The purpose of this is to take open data, so the current open government data off data.gov.nz. Through the event, we actually had a whole set of new open data come out from various agencies. And also any open data. As Vic said, it's just because it's government, we all think government has all the data. It's not, it's anything. Weather and maps, for instance, is very open nowadays, and we use a lot. But instead of just saying, here's all this open data, it's a big bucket, go for a swim, get in teams and enjoy yourself for 2 days, you have to have a reason to actually put this stuff together. And we use life events. The life events were based on DIA's life events, is that correct? Yes, it was. Nodding heads from people who know. We changed the wording to be a little less governmenty, for want of a better phrase. We had death, not terminal incidents. So there were things like moving around New Zealand, death, having a baby, going to university. And those were the core aspirations that people then could say, that life event is something that I think, with data, with some geeks around me, I could do something about that. I can produce something that will make people's lives easier. So let's do this. Hackathons are very much doing things. They're not a come around and sit and talk about it in committees. They are getting a team. You've got 48 hours. We're going to feed and water you, as we say. You're going to have fun. But you do have to create something. You've got to go away, sit in rooms, and actually create something that then can be quote unquote judged. So we did. We had a whole bunch of people come along. 2 pictures just to show off. But we got the sign changed. We were very happy about that. Ages and ages, didn't it, James? The biggest part of the event was actually the base we stood on happened in this room. So 130 people. Imagine a lot of them had no idea why they were there. They came with their skills. Dan Rando, anyone who knows Dan Rando, then took the whole of the room and did an audit of what have we got in this room. So what are the skills that we have? And what he's doing there is trying to work out, are you from government? Are you not from government? Are you a technical person? Are you a designer? And he moved everyone around so that everyone had a sense of who's in the room. And then people would start to pitch saying, I would like to work on something around how do I find a flat because I'm a student, or I'm going to work on how to find political donations, and does that have an effect on who gets to be a board member? Where's the data for that? Through that, the teams then self-selected. So at the beginning I said that there was just a whole bunch of people came in, and within an hour and a half we had 13 teams of around 5 or 6 people. Only one team actually knew each other. That was the Air New Zealand team. They flew down for it. Of course they would. They then all left this room, found a home in the myriad of meeting rooms, and then cracked into it. To the point where we actually had a band and some beer. Volunteers went out, had a beer, the band started, and then no one else turned up because they all started working. This is Friday, 8 o'clock. We were stunned. We dropped beer and had a dance. And that's a good example of what they're doing. So they were then taking open data, using all their skills, their designing skills, the people who were the quote-unquote customers, and all 13, it went down to 12 actually, teams worked on it for 2 days. But because they had a live event, a thing that they were trying to solve, as opposed to, here's some data, could you please try and make it valuable somehow, they found it extremely easy to have a focus. Not necessarily easy to get through. I'm not going to go through all of them. That link up there is still valid. That will take you to all of the New Zealand teams and their whatever the word is, projects. There's a number there that were Wellington based. The question that we always get is, okay, you had 12 teams working through the goodness of their heart because no one gets paid for this. This is a community event. There was an awful lot of support from the agencies, obviously from the open data group. Stats were there. We had a lot of vendors helping us, sponsoring us. Fujitsu paid for the coffee. HP paid for a driving game. Who played the driving game? That was interesting. The teams themselves, though, were not paid. They turned up, they worked together. Almost all of the teams had someone from private sector and someone from public sector together. And the ones that we came up with, I'll just run through. The one in the middle, I help, I need help, I can help. That was an emergency response system, and that has now been the system itself that was put forward. The idea has been taken on by Joe's company, forgotten who it is. The vendor has said that's a wonderful idea. We would like to actually take that with you and your old idea, the team, and make that into a product. That's at one extreme. We had about 5 or 6 of projects that had agencies and or vendors approach them to say, not necessarily the whole idea, but the way that you've approached that product or that problem is novel. The top one, which is the voting one, they wanted to come up with the whole online voting system. That was ambitious for 2 days, to be fair. But what they did do was they focused on solving why don't youth and people with disabilities, how can we encourage them to vote? And their design and the way that they approached it has been taken on by one of the agencies and to say, come and teach us why you did it that way. The Lighthouse one is probably my favourite. Actually, no, my top one is the one with the picture of Miramar, I think it might be. Of course it is. Was Fairfax Media plus Wellington City Council data and central data. And they have a system that says what's your suburb going to look like in 10, 20, 30, 50 years' time using trend analysis and algorithms based on data that I've now. Fascinating. All of these are working examples, so you can go find them off the top link. Go find the sites, the projects, they've all got a video explaining how they got there, the data they used, and some of them now are becoming actual products. Lighthouse is my favourite. That's the one that says, as I said before, if you are appointed to a board, Is that because you ran for MP somewhere somehow and was trying to link those two together? That's a very journalistic approach to data, use of data. So the value in data can be used in many ways. Here's something that will help people in times of stress. Here's a product and someone can make money out of it, or here's a journalistic approach to data. Sorry, not in use. So this is the question of why bother with hackathons. Now, I've just ran through a number of the projects that came out of use of open data. And none of this could have happened without any open data. The reason that we at Miramar run these events, though, is not just for these projects. In fact, who was in a project here? I know some people were in a project. Do this now. We don't actually care about the projects. That's the reason to bring people together. We have two other reasons which are meeting goal. One is we want to pop bubbles. There's a lot of people in this town particularly who work in agencies and in silos, both in and out of private sector and public sector. And by bringing people together and popping those bubbles, we are encouraging collaboration. And the reason we do that is the long-term effect is that everybody's skill level and connections raise and everybody goes up. That's the real reason why Miramar uses open data and open source and connects everybody. I thought of this last night. I went, oh, one more thing. We're going to do another one soon. So this is my little pitch to you all. It's going to be slightly different, but the 28th and 29th of November, we're going to have another one, hopefully here. James has just found out. So keep an eye out on that. It's going to be a slightly different approach. It's going to be slightly different than a full public blown one, but we're going to do something very similar, but with a very specific reason. Thank you very much. That, I hope, gives you a sense of what the Gov Hack was about, how it stood upon open data, and why we bothered in the first place.
Yes, some of the open data comes with a lot of promises, as we already heard. For government agencies, it allows them to make informed decisions, policy decisions. We can enhance efficiency across agencies, but also inside the agency, and which can lead to cost savings. And we can improve service quality to our people, the citizens that the government serve. For businesses, it can spark innovative ideas, lead to innovative products and services. Both as application developers, but also as aggregators and enrichers of data. So we can create new data from open data, and it also allows us to have a better understanding of the markets and of the needs of our consumers. Lastly, but most importantly, for the citizens, it empowers them or creates transparency and accountability of the government, and it allows us not only to scrutinize the data, which can then eventually lead to better data, but also the decisions that are being made on our behalf. It can foster participation, so especially also for marginalized groups that are otherwise sort of on the fringes of democracy and society. And lastly, it empowers us to make better decisions as voters and consumers when when it's time to give our vote, and when it's time to check out at the supermarket. Ultimately, open data can help us to create a fair, just, and equal society that is transparent, and for everyone can participate. And so we can not only make those informed decisions, but we can then go back and also monitor the outcomes of those decisions. This is part of an infographic we developed for Statistics New Zealand. It's a census release, transport communication, and it's not only, one purpose was to kind of provide some key insights to the data that Statistics New Zealand found out from the census, but also to engage with the public and to engage in the use of open data and sort of link them back to the website and find the open data that's behind that. What we can learn is that with less income, you're not only less likely to have more cars, but you also are less likely to have an internet connection. Your access to telecommunication, for example, drops to below 50% when you have a household income of less than 20,000. So, and why I use this particular graphic, why I went back, is a few days ago, just there was an article, an opinion piece and stuff. So it's talking about the digital divide in New Zealand and how, and what interested me is that not only it's sort of access is dependent on the income, your household income, but also by your ethnic group. And so I thought, wait a minute, I didn't come across that data in the census data set, so I thought it was a good test case to see how easy it is to kind of find this data. So I went to the census website and had another look myself. And this is how the nz.stats portal looks like. It's not the most user-friendly, but it has a lot of data sets in there. And so you kind of have to customize your data, and quite soon I could found the census data set and go back. And while I was at it, I was also looking at the export sort of functions that I have to actually get hold of that data. And so one of those is a programmer interface, which should allow computers to access that data. And it's still, to be fair, it's still in beta, so it didn't really work for me. Also, the CSV download didn't work on my favorite browser. I had to go on another browser to be able to sort of access the CSV file. The Excel worked, which is sort of the least sort of machine-friendly to use, but that worked. And so I could extract that data again, and then that's again from the census data, and just look at internet access by incoming in. But I didn't find anything about the ethnic groups, although that data is there, and Statistics New Zealand decided to not include that somehow in this open data portal. So I had to go somewhere else on the website, and I found the Household Use of Information and Communication Technology and Survey of 2012. And that was the one that the article was also referring to, and you can see that by ethnic group, we get quite, it's quite obvious like who can actually access the open data. And so also there was by household income. And so what's interesting here is that there's different sort of brackets, different bins for the income brackets, which makes it a bit harder to compare. You have to kind of average that, rebin that, and so then you can compare it to your census data. And although the census data is kind of a year after that, we see less access to internet, but especially for those lower income groups. And so, and this is another kind of sign is that the data you're using, you have to be really careful. And so where does it come from? How is the survey designed? Why do we have these gaps? It turns out the household use data is mainly done by telephone call, or telephone, so electronic calls. And so one of those low income groups, they don't necessarily have, or they're less likely to have telephone activity. So, there's a bit of a bias here. And I think that's just important to note. I think it's a great example to show that there's open data is a necessity, but it's not it doesn't get us all the way. So there's still a lot of challenges that we have with open data. One of it, there's a lot of public data. It's not really open in the sense that it's machine readable. It's not often well documented or comes with the proper license to use. There's many inconsistencies, the way addresses are encoded, the way the categories and all these things are done. And we talked about the lack of access, so the digital divide, like actually who's going to be able to open that data, so we need to work on that. Further, we need to be aware that this data even exists, that we can use it. Where can we find that? So there's another challenge to overcome. And then when it's released in the raw form, to have it open in a meaningful way for everyone to use, we need to also work on education and improve data literacy, statistical knowledge. So, because otherwise, it's the danger is that only tech savvy, the already privileged people are going to be the profit of that open data, and the people that can pay those experts. And so the marginalized groups can stay on the fringes. So we really have to work on that. We also need to have appropriate tools on all levels. So there's for analysts, for example, we need to be able to help them interpret and analyze that data, communicate that data to the public. We need to have tools that promote data. And and for me as a developer, of course, we need those programming interfaces. So otherwise we have to go download an Excel file, convert that manually, upload it to the application. Next year, new data comes out. I have to do that same again, and it's just a waste of time, it costs money, and so we need these application interfaces so the applications can sort of go in and update themselves once a new data is published, or once you push a button at least, you kind of want to have a bit of a check and control there. And so what we kind of see ourselves kind of on all those levels, but specifically on providing those tools to analysts. And this is an interactive reporting tool we developed for the Human Rights Commission. And it's to monitor fairness at works. It works and combines many open and other not so open data sets. Some of them, the Human Rights Commission had to go and pay statistics in the disaggregated data, for example. And it should enable analysts to perform and communicate the analysis that they do, and but also enable government agencies and citizens to go and scrutinize their data and go and explore it by themselves. So it's going to take a drive here. So this is the tool we created. So what there's a.
We only see your desktop.
Oh, okay. It's going to be a bit harder to drive. There we are. Okay, you guys got to help me. So here's a few categories, few issues, and so we have some indicators. And I was going to look at the pay issue. So there's some. It allows in the back end allows the analysts to write the analysis and sort of on a high-level view for the issue across different indicators. And so we have these kind of previews for those indicators. And one of the issues we often look at is the pay gap, the opposite-sided pay gap. And so here we have we can see that it's not really surprising if you're younger or older, you earn less money per hour than when you're sort of like in the main middle age. That's the often-cited gender pay gap. That's and then, but there's also an ethnic pay gap. Which is shows that depending on your ethnicity, you have that. And this will interest you specifically about like disaggregating that data. This tool allows to kind of look at the disaggregates also, so you can combine age, sex, and ethnicity, and so this is all grouped. But once you can kind of see how that kind of ends up, and so the least most marginalized groups have about 50% now. And one more thing I want to show is how this will allow us to track it over time, and we can see an upward trend, but we can also see that the gap's kind of widening overall over the last few years. And there's a few other things about the disaggregated data, and maybe why some people don't really like it. You get outliers, and that depends on your survey design. You have if you have this too small group, you may have a bigger error. So if your sample size becomes too small, your data becomes less robust and less reliable. So if your survey is from the start, if you disaggregate it, your averages may not be so meaningful. So there's always to be care has to be taken of how this data is used and what people know. I think that's pretty much it.